Well, good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome to another monthly check-in with William Kittle the Fifth, aka Bill Taylor. And I'm going to just call you Bill because that's what I know you as, Bill Taylor. And thanks for being with me again. And how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm just fine, just fine. I see Kathy Sue's here, Taz is here, and it happens. Corky's here, and Robert is here. And it's good to have everyone with us here on a Monday night. It's the 26th of September, 2022. And I told you where I wanted to start. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the spot right at the beginning
Sure.
of the show and put this chart up there that you put on your Twitter a few days ago, which I am just fascinated with. And I want you to kind of walk us through it. So let me find it and we will turn it over to you. Okay. A number of familiar names here, but the one that's very interesting to me is Prince Eugene S. Trubetskoy. And how is he connected to the JFK assassination? That's what I want to know. Okay, it's all yours.
Well, I mean, he's sort of I, I don't know if he's a key player, but he does fit into a couple different conspiracies over the years. Um, and I'll just give you a little bit of background, just so we can get to him. I think it's helpful because I didn't just look up the name, but just sort of perusing the JFK files on the maryfarrell.org site, which uh, collects and archives and collates and parses all the files and tries to make them readable for search engines. It's a subscription site, by the way. Um, I kept coming across um, a number of characters in the carpet and textile business, or the carpet and upholstery business, textile business in general, but carpets and rugs especially, which was kind of interesting. And there's a theory behind that, but we won't get into that today. But the the it just is on a whim. I decided to just search for the word carpet or rug, and you get a ton of hits in the JFK files. Now, a lot of these are it seems like carpet companies. Every member of La Cosa Nostra back in the 50s and early 60s had a ownership interest in some sort of uh, carpet retail or carpet wholesale manufacturing services. It looks like a front for the mafia. Um, one of the people who kept popping up in my carpet search, while sort of looking for something else, was this gentleman named Bernard Wiseman. Now, Bernard Wiseman is actually let me just check my glasses. Bernard Wiseman was actually interviewed by the Warren Commission. He figures prominently in the Warren Report, and he was supposedly looked at relatively heavily as sort of the leader of the or participant in the right wing portion of the cabal or the right wing conspiracy that killed JFK. And the reason for that is because his name was on a advertisement in the Dallas Morning News, placed in the Dallas Morning News the day before Kennedy was shot, basically calling JFK a traitor. Um, and I'm sure uh, people familiar with the JFK assassination will remember that there's all kinds of speculation as to who killed JFK: the mafia, the Cubans, the Russians, the Lee Harvey himself. But the right wing, this Bernard Wiseman sort of encompasses the right wing portion of the cabal, or as a supposed right wing portion. It's not so much all that important as to what he said, although some of his. Yeah, I got a light for you. There we go. Um, so Bernard Weissman places this ad. The Warren Commission talks to him. He goes through his biography relatively quickly during the testimony. And the thing that struck out at me was that he was right out of high school, say 1951, 52. He got a job as an experimental machinist with the Nuclear Development Corps. Now, I thought that was unusual in that this sort of run-of-the-mill carpet salesman had worked for a nuke company. His resume gets progressively worse after that. He sold patent medicines. He said, now this is all what he told the Warren Commission. He was selling. He might have tried to sell encyclopedias door to door at one point. Anyway, his at the time that he was involved in the publication of his advertisement, he was a carpet salesman in Dallas, but he had worked for this Nuclear Development Corp, which was a very sophisticated company back in 1951, 52. It was really the on the cutting edge of nuclear technology. And if you go through these scientific papers and its founding and its history of Nuclear Development Corp, one of the key players who was also employed as a senior scientist was this Prince Eugene Trubatsky. I don't know if that's exactly how it's pronounced, Trubatskoy. I've heard variations, but he's a prince. His name is Eugene, and he comes from the House of Trubetskoy, which is a noble family from Russia from way back when. The reason why I found Prince Trubetskoy interesting is that I had run across the name Trubetskoy on a couple different occasions, but most especially in relation to his son-in-law, James Booth. James Booth was a son of Merson Booth, who was a nuclear engineer at Gibson Island. So this Trubetskoy, Prince Trubetskoy of Nuclear Development Corp, and Merson Booth, who worked for the Atomic Energy Commission as a nuclear engineer, also as a naval engineer, they had a relatively close relationship, it would seem, or they knew each other relatively well, since their kids married each other at some point. And Booth especially, Merson Booth especially, has been. He can also be connected to a gentleman named Zalman Shapiro of another nuclear company called NUMEC. Now, NUMEC is famous for losing 300 pounds of highly enriched uranium in a place where the Mossad could find it. But you essentially what you have here. This is all pretty much all before 1963. This graph is this Trubetskoy character working for Nuclear Development Corp, and Bernard Wiseman is really how I just found him. He doesn't seem to have much importance after that until you get to the Kennedy assassination as maybe as a patsy or some sort of diversion. But Booth and Trubetskoy, they show up a lot in the disappearance of uranium from about 1959 to 1965, which is when NUMEC was producing its highly enriched uranium, and it was disappearing at a very fast rate.
That is so interesting. I remember looking into NUMEC when I was studying the Urenco company, and I think there are, as I recall, there's a direct relationship there too. So this statement, "Welcome, Mr. Kennedy, to Dallas," which many of us have seen. I can't remember what the fine print is, but it's basically a threat, and he apparently is the author of it. But other than that, this Bernard Wiseman doesn't really have a role, except for he just is there, right?
Yeah, he really doesn't have a role. He's just there. But he was, yeah, you get the sense that he was sent there to do this specifically. He must have been a known character to some of these fellows in the conspiracy. He was from Mount Vernon, New York. He showed up in Dallas 3 weeks before the assassination. He quickly becomes friends with, goes to, I think, a John Birch meeting, and just was all gung-ho to join the John Birch Society, but decides that there are a bunch of anti-Semites. Like, you couldn't read that anywhere else. It's almost like he's been put up to this, or this is his part in the conspiracy. Because you think about it, you get up a whole new branch of inquiry into another cabal that may or may not have anything to do with the JFK assassination. The right-wing cabal of right-wing nut jobs living in Dallas in the early 1960s. He's, his associates include associates of General Walker, who Oswald supposedly took a shot at a couple of months earlier. But if you look at it from the point of view, and I just started thinking about this a little bit earlier because I hadn't given it much thought, but why would you do that? Well, you could certainly exhaust a lot of FBI resources by throwing another list of probably 50 or 60 witnesses into the potential suspect pool. You can start aside if you can devote your entire probably FBI office or 80 of it to to looking into the JFK assassination, knowing that they're chasing dead ends. Well, then you could also maybe assign the compromised and captured FBI agents to the parts of the investigation that you don't want them to find anything about. I don't know if that makes complete sense, but basically you have some of a majority of the FBI chasing shadows, and then you assign your trusted deep state FBI agents to the parts of the case which could be sensitive if if anybody really wanted to take a hard look into who killed JFK.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I really want to think a little bit about what the presence of Prince Eugene S. Trubetskoy means to us as we try to unwrap.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly more. There's certainly more to this than this graphic. So, as I mentioned, and actually, I wrote up a piece, so there's more detail on my website. But there's really only I've only found two meaningful pure play nuclear R&D or nuclear manufacturing companies prior to 1963, probably prior to 1969, 70. And that's the Nuclear Development Corp right here. And they were essentially a number of senior Atomic Energy Commission directors who were mostly stationed out of Oak Ridge, doing R&D work. And what they had done is, they left out Atomic Energy Commission and set up shop as a consulting and R&D shop for profit. So this is Nuclear Development Corp. 1952. One of the original financiers of this effort was Lawrence Rockefeller. Trubetskoy is a nuclear scientist. He's on a number of different papers that were published under the Nuclear Development Corp name, and he does fall into this circle. I'd have to go back and review some of my earlier work, but he certainly falls into the circle of the Ignatieff family, or Ignatieff.
Yeah.
George Ignatieff, he had a number of roles, but he was ambassador to the United Nations from Canada at one point. And right after World War II, actually, his first real diplomatic role was the Atomic Energy Committee, which was a sort of a United Nations type World Atomic Energy Commission. And I think he held one of the 5 seats. So Trubetskoy is related to this Ignatieff fellow. Okay. Trubetskoy or Ignatieff, I have found in the same room with, I believe it's Vladimir de Mohrenschildt. It's George de Mohrenschildt's brother.
Dimitri.
They were actually in the same room in 1948 giving a speech at a Slavic language conference, and they seem to intertwine on a number of occasions. So, this prince, the de Mohrenschildt, the Ignatieffs, they all seem to be part of this white Russian community. If you listen to the work of George Webb, you might recall that the Rockefellers had promised these white Russians all kinds of riches if they, follow the Rockefeller lead, and presumably that's what some of these white Russians were doing, trying to get back, trying to get back some of their wealth, and actually holding real jobs like Prince Trubetskoy. He was a totally legitimate nuclear scientist, and actually he's in IMBD. He developed an animation company, and he's been in like 20 or 30 animated films within the past, say, 20 years. Jumanji, things like Disney type films.
Oh.
Actually, it's a little piece of trivia. It's not really relevant to what's going on here, but
now, what about the Kennedy assassination angle itself? Now, I'm just my theory, just kind of off the top of my head, but with some background theory, is that this document, this "Welcome, Mr. Kennedy" thing, was a throw to try to get people to blame this whatever the committee is at the bottom there, the American Fact Finding Committee or something, and to associate it with right wing the usual suspects like General Walker, and that. But however, that is not that is just a throw. That is not to me a smoking gun in terms of this particular Lawrence Rockefeller generated connection here. Only leads to the throw. It doesn't lead to the actual trigger people.
No, not at all. But if you can conclude, and I agree with you, Bernard Wiseman is the throw. Okay, the throw is so you don't look at Trubetskoy, you don't look at James Booth. We'll get into Peter Derby later, but he does play a role in the Kennedy assassination, even though he was 3 years old. And I would argue that the entire Kennedy assassination was the Kennedy assassination was almost entirely due to the fact that Israel wanted the bomb and JFK did not want them to have it. And by 1960, they were already delivering or producing the uranium, which would be delivered to Israel at the NUMEC plant in Apollo, Pennsylvania. The company NUMEC was formed in 1957 and this is I think my best find I've ever had, and I wish more people would look into it. But NUMEC company was formed in 1957 from the merger of 3 penny stock companies. One of those penny stock companies was the Santoy Mining Company.
Yep.
The Santoy Mining Company only source of revenue was 4 mines that at least to ASARCO. ASARCO is American Smelting and Refining Company of America. Along that line, ASARCO. ASARCO was owned by the Guggenheims and the Rockefellers, and actually the cousins of Lawrence Rockefeller, the William Rockefeller line, seem to have the control of ASARCO. So ASARCO essentially has economic control over NUMEC. NUMEC produced the uranium, which went to Israel. And I would not be surprised if Kennedy did not have an idea that maybe that NUMEC was specifically sending uranium to Israel, and that's why he was taken out.
Okay, and that is connected to Booth, is it, in this diagram?
Yeah. So Trubetskoy, okay, and that's where the graphic is a little bit limited to what I could show. Merson Booth, okay, at the time that NUMEC is formed in 1957, works at the Atomic Energy Commission under Admiral Strauss. Okay, he works in the licensing division, and it was NUMEC who received the very first commercial license to make weapons grade uranium.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Merson Booth was a colleague of Zalman Shapiro, the president of NUMEC, while they both worked on Rickover electric boats in the early 50s, late 40s. So Merson Booth knew the president of NUMEC.
I'm remembering the Santoy Mining Company from I guess it was from the same research I was doing into Urenco, but I'm s- I'm s- I'm remembering a connection to the that big find of gold in New Guinea that they discovered
Mhm.
during World War II, and well, I won't speculate.
Awesome.
Right?
It's the San Antonio Mining Company goes a lot of different. I can get you to Katy Perry within 3 steps of the San Antonio Mining Company.
Yeah.
You want it? San Antonio Mining Company was taken over. Tried to be taken over. There was an attempted takeover of the San Antonio Mining Company around 1910 by uh, Charles M. Schwab. Charles M. Schwab was the founder of U.S. Steel, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, and his great niece is Katy Perry, the pop star.
Well, who knew that? I guess if you read D State News, you know that because
Yeah,
that's
you would know. But it's more than just trivia because that name pops up a lot. The Katy Perry's uncle, first uncle, her mother's brother, was married to his second marriage. I'll try not to get too confusing with, and there's no graphs for this one on here. Katy Perry's second wife was the daughter of Joe Lubin. Joe Lubin was the essentially rescued Pepsi Cola from bankruptcy in 1932. But what he really did is that Joe Lubin was part of the Lansky syndicate in all likelihood, and they would drive companies into bankruptcy so that they could buy them up for cents on a dollar. So Pepsi was one of his first was one of his takeovers.
okay. Well, I'm always fascinated when we find the White Russian connections like that, and when you tie this guy to Dmitry von Mohrenschelt as opposed to George de Mohrenschelt,
Right.
uh, because he liked to be German, Dmitry, he used
Mm-hmm.
von. But he was a teacher at Loomis School where my dad was a student, although not at the exact same year. And so he's really in with the Rockefellers, and that what you and George are saying is consistent with what I've seen as well. That these people who formerly were associated with the Russian Empire, especially de Mohrenschelt, who really was from the rulers of Belarus, the largest one of the largest cities in Russia, Minsk, was basically their town, and they had a management role in the Nobel oil company that was running the Baku oil fields, the largest and most coveted field of oil in the entire universe at that time. So all of these guys coming over here to do mischief is very interesting. I did a little bit of looking into Trubetskoy family myself, and I found that they are intermarried with the Golitsyn family. And when I said Golitsyn, I thought, oh, bing, ding, ding, ding. That's that guy that we don't know who he was really a spy for, but he was so showed up in the early '60s to try to denounce Nozenko, who we've talked about before. Nozenko was one of your man Pete Begley's
Mm-hmm.
subjects, and Nozenko was holed up in that safe house that George has identified as being his lordship's kindness, the old mansion there next to Resurrection Cemetery, where my dad was buried back in 1971. All of these crazy connections, but I think that's probably right, seeing how that particular place was under kind of under the control of the Avery Dulles Catholic Church area people, as I recall, and that makes another connection. These things all do get connected, but the idea of Golitsyn being another one of those White Russian royalty names is interesting in thinking about, who was he really, and how did when he ends up with the CIA trying to discredit Nosenko, who's who is who's playing for who. I need a program.
Right, right. Well, another one where the name Peter Derby comes up, another KGB defector. I'm going to say Peter Deryabev, was brought in by Bagley, and he came in to uh, discredit Nosenko, and he immediately wrote a letter to the Warren Commission, not the Warren Commission, to the FBI, maybe the CIA, after the assassination, within like 2 weeks, blaming the KGB for the assassination of Kennedy, and where things get really, really strange, and I can't say with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty certain. This Peter Derby fellow, okay, who's around age 60 right now, maybe 63, 64. His biography is so messed up. His official biography and official sources, McCall's magazine in Canada, for example, I believe he's probably the son of this KGB defector, Derbyev. I don't know why I can't say the name.
Yeah, I've seen it written. It might be something like Deryabin, maybe.
Deryabin, but it looks just like Derby when you write it out. And Peter Derby, who is the founder of the Troika Bank, which became the Troika Laundromat, a huge money laundering operation. His biography has so many inconsistencies in it that he's clearly trying to hide who his father is, and he actually essentially asserts that his father is this Ignatieff fellow, the UN ambassador to the Canadian ambassador to the UN in the 1960s. But really, it looks like it's some sort of another throw. But the throws are telling, because then you can almost immediately say that it probably was not right-wing crazies in Dallas who shot Kennedy. Once you figure out it's a throw, you want to see who set the throw up, and you get back to this Rockefeller, White Russian cabal, I guess you could say.
But then we also have the Schlumberger, the kind of French connection people, and I can't remember the name of that, the one that ended up opening a great big art gallery in Dallas. Those people are what I call the Synarchy guys. And I've always wondered whether the Synarchy and the White Russians are, the same, or are they working together? And that's just more layers of mystery to peel back. I really have been. I know a lot about Angleton, but he makes me feel creepy. I just don't want to deal with Angleton. But
Well,
now I finally decided I've got to pick up this book I have by Jefferson Morley called The Ghost, the Secret Life of James Angleton, and get familiar with at least the popular conception of him. That Morley is a guy that he's kind of a limited hangout. He's got a lot of insider information, but then who's he really working for?
he's working for them.
All right, but
I heard him on a podcast just weeks ago, and he said something so utterly ridiculous. It'd be so about Richard Helms and in the relationship with the Shah that I would never. I don't trust the guy as far as I can throw. In that, he says it basically started that the Shah and Richard Helms, former director of the CIA, did not meet until Helms was ambassador to Iran sometime in the 1970s, and they had gone. There are plenty of places that say they had gone to Swiss finishing school back in the 1930s, and and that Helms participated was a big player in the 1953 coup in Iran that installed the Shah. So I almost think that the Angleton angle is interesting. Spooky guy, supposedly a drunkard, but there seems to be a lot of attention on him, partly probably because he's been dead for a long time, and I can't help but think that he wonder that he's another throw. That he might have been too drunk to trust with the secrets at some point. It's the Bissels who nobody ever talks about, and even less so Robert Amory Jr., who nobody ever talks about. And he was at the Bissell level of directorship at the CIA at the time, and he left at the same time as Bissell over the. But his name is never mentioned in the people that JFK fired over the failed Bay of Pigs operation.
Okay, a bunch of good points, but still, I think we have to study James Jesus Angleton with like Tim Weiner is another one. He wrote Legacy of Ashes about the CIA, and he wrote Enemies about the FBI, and everything he writes, it just drips with, oh, he's working for them, he's working for them. It's a spin, but if you can put that stuff aside, there's all kinds of gems that they pack in there because they've got to sell you on their credibility. So they put a lot of real stuff in there. Annie Jacobson, you got to read Annie Jacobson or you'll miss a lot, even though you know that she's a limited hangout. She's got to be. And
right.
but with this this Angleton, to me, first of all, he has a Habsburg jaw. I mean, come on, he's a Habsburg. His loyalty is to northern Italy. He's one of them, and that's why I put him in the synarchist pile, and that's who he's. Like I look at that as like a third force that people don't ever think about. People think about the American side and the communist side, but they don't think about the synarchy. But this is where I see him basically being a broker between the British and the Americans, but really having loyalty to something else, i.e., this European power that may very well be represented by Klaus Schwab in them today in the World Economic Forum. So I'm still thinking Angleton is very important. Plus, he was also a murderer. He was one of them that he said he was a man-eating shark, and he meant it. He's a killer. So he's still on my radar screen. But you might be right. Maybe he is a big throw. He certainly did attract a lot of attention. I'm not sure if the Department of Silly Walks might have been named after him or something, but
Well, now that you mention it, I believe he spent a lot of time in Italy before the war. I believe his father worked for IBM.
No, it was the National Cash Register Company, and for that reference, get into what David Underdown has done on that, because the father is a real key player in the Detroit deep state people.
Okay, because this Wiseman fellow worked for Olivetti after he worked for the nuclear company, and I believe NCR and Olivetti. I believe they worked through joint ventures in those days, so it might have been NCR and Olivetti. I think I've seen those two names together. It'd be interesting to look into.
I also was just reading an excerpt from Glenn Greenwald, who was actually, I guess, quoting Jefferson Morley and saying that the successor to James Angleton is Dick Cheney.
Okay.
like Dick Cheney just took over the Angleton files and that kind of blows my mind to think, yeah, that does make sense in a way, but you have to look at it from a lot of angles. But there's straight lines from this to that, and I think that's one I want to look into more.
Yeah, he's an interesting character.
All right. What else you got on your mind tonight, Bill Taylor?
Let's see. You know what? That's how much time we have. Let me just look at
Get about 20 minutes.
my. There's always the Murphy angle to everything. I love giving that guy a hard time. Um, I'll mention that it's funny. In 1993 here in New Jersey, uh, we had Jim Florio was our governor, and he quickly made enemies of everybody. So this is I believe he would have been elected 89 because we have odd years here for governors in New Jersey, 89, and then soon the banners and the bumper stickers were Florio free in 93 because he jacked the taxes up on everybody, and so he was. I could have sworn he was recalled. Maybe he was. I'd have to look at Wikipedia. But Christine Todd Whitman became governor. But Jim Florio died, I guess it was this morning, and former governors are lauding his accomplishments as everybody's least favorite governor up until Phil Murphy. So Jim Florio actually, and I made the list and I tweeted it today. Jim Florio went from the worst governor in New Jersey to only the sixth worst governor of New Jersey after, given who we had after Jim Florio in 1993. And Phil Murphy remains at the top of that list of New Jersey's worst governors. The governor, so to bring this into the current times, the governor had a lot of hubris and a lot of bold pronouncements during this whole COVID, the beginning days of COVID, and you could tell the spark has really been drained out of him. I don't know if somebody had a discussion with him or if it was Cuomo's resignation next door, but it looks like he's been hitting the bottle pretty heavily the past year, and the enthusiasm for vaccines and masks and silly rules seems to have gone out the door. And I can't help but think that he really did have a talking to. That there's something going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of, but it shows up in sort of the behaviors of these politicians who are all pretty bold with their stark mandates and economic shutdowns and just insane policies during COVID, that they've really backed off on that. Not that time wouldn't have required them to back off, but they don't seem to have the confidence or the spirit of acting like a dictator that they once did.
Wait a minute. I have a comment that I'd like to make about what you just said. Are you ready?
Sure.
Thank goodness we've turned the corner. Are we turning the corner on this bill? God,
Yeah.
oh, let them go crawl away and hide. Oh
Right.
my God, it's been a nightmare, and oh, the thought that we've actually turned the corner. But it's a sad thing because what it means is that all of our fears are going to be true. That these horrible results are real. It's not just coincidences, and the predictions for the future based upon the excess deaths that we've seen, and you've documented in your Deep State News website in New Jersey in particular, but all around the world, they're coming up with tons of excess deaths. It's not COVID deaths. So where's it coming from? Well, it could be from the
Don't even say it. I don't know how many marks you got, but don't even say it.
Yeah. Well, I just asked the question. I didn't.
I'm starting to think about. Okay, we're seeing these excess deaths. I'm starting to have a slightly more nuanced alternative view of what we're seeing. I know what we're seeing, but it's also right now. This is everybody can make fun of me. These excess deaths, I think, were made for TV, if that makes sense. In that you're seeing them in athletes, on TV, and you're seeing them. You're seeing them as stories, especially when the young are affected. Okay, you're seeing a lot of young people. Uh, the excess date around among young people is going higher and higher. Um, Nobody, of course, the media wants to completely ignore it. But I was wondering, you have to consider that. Okay, what if Biden didn't win the presidency, or win with the quotes?
Yeah.
Would we be seeing these excess deaths on TV, especially the athletes, which are on camera, or young people's stories on 2020? I think we'd be seeing it 24/7. I, I think. I don't know if you know where I'm going at.
Well,
These were made for, these excess deaths are made for TV for Trump's second term, to put it as bluntly as possible.
I've been thinking about that. You said this maybe a week or so ago, and it's starting to really sound right to me that they thought that they could launch this thing, and when things went wrong, that they would blame it on Trump because they thought Trump was going to be the next president. And then when Trump managed to lose, maybe he's the one that drove the Ferrari to the to dump
So, now think about it. So,
but so he loses, and but they've already set the thing in motion. Snohomish County man has done his thing. So so now everybody's committed. The whole medical establishment. Old uh, Christian Drosten over there in Germany is getting ready to invent his PCR super test, and they're all wired to go. And then, doggone it, Trump lost. I mean, we were going to pin it all on
you
Trump.
can't pull it back. You can't pull that snowball back. It's already got so much momentum.
This is your idea, man, and I think it's a brilliant idea.
But look at it. Okay, but look at it in the context of the blatantly stolen election. Now, it wasn't just cheating here and there, piecemeal.
I mean, you
cheating.
can't say that either. Now you're going to give me another strike.
Okay.
The blatantly, almost
blatantly excessive counting, after hours counting.
We're only speaking about counting, folks,
Right.
not about.
Right. Okay, but it was so in your face. Okay.
Yes,
With
the
expectations
videos that we saw were in your face.
He can't. Okay. The guy who's in there right now cannot win even with a marginal amount, barely some noticeable amount of excess counting of late nights. He can't do that. He's incapable. He hasn't campaigned in weeks. The only thing we could hope for is to make it so blatant that Mr. Trump takes the Oval Office again in the second term, and then we wreck him, we wreck his followers, we wreck everything imaginable. We put him up for genocidal homicide for releasing this warp speed vax, and all these deaths that are on TV, and these kids that are dying, and the Facebook groups that are forming. They'll never vote for him again, or a Republican again, or trust anybody, with an R in front of their name. I mean, really, really destroy it, because he rushed this thing and it's killing people, and it's all on TV. So that's all in the context of Biden, the guy in the White House now, not being able to even come close marginally. So you can't have a January 1 if he doesn't do this blatantly. Well, then there's no January 6th event to really accuse Trump of starting a coup, or his followers of starting a coup, or his followers of violence. So he has to win excessively, so that there is a court challenge, and then Donald challenges it and takes his seat, and then we hammer him with the deaths.
it makes a lot of sense, and especially when we realize that, you know, these people have superb intelligence services, and Trump certainly would have the intelligence services to be able to figure out, what the Democrat plan was. Um, my, I guess I'm cynical enough to think, well, you know, all of it is just a school play. It's all of it is just it's all manufactured, and but between Trump and the Biden people, there was a real war, and I think that war is still going on right now. And whether they're just both parts of a greater conspiracy to impose some totalitarian state, they're two different methods of doing it. Uh, and they have different teams, and they're working, to defeat the other team, and that gets around to how do you people, how do you characterize the Ukraine war, for instance? Uh, how how do we? Well, anyway, there's nobody in the Democratic Party that's going to be able to step up and be a credible alternative to your man, to Brandon right now, right?
No.
There's nobody, and so they're kind of really stuck. I mean, Kamala Harris is awful. She's just incredibly awful. As it's just all she can do is smile and giggle.
So why pick those two to begin with? I mean, and they were chosen. Think about it. Biden was chosen in March. I mean,
Well, they thought they were going to get Cuomo, right?
I would argue, yeah, that they were dressing up Cuomo for, all Biden had to do was come down with COVID at the convention or a week before the convention, and then switch him out with Cuomo. It's a simple super delegate vote, and it's rightful. You wouldn't want either party to have their candidate, the presidential candidate, assassinated in late August, and then go through a whole primary process to pick another one. You have to have some sort of contingency there in case the guy dies or the woman dies. So this is 2020, the middle of COVID. It's very easy to just say Joe Biden has succumbed to COVID. He's not up to campaign trail. It's either he's dead or he's frail and won't be able to make it. So we're gonna super delegates are gonna vote, and Cuomo has said he would be happy to meet the challenge, and then put him in there. Then you don't have to cheat as blatantly, okay? And you just have to kind of get close, and maybe he even would have beaten Trump legitimately, okay, because he was competent and he could string two sentences together. I mean, they got stuck with Biden. I would argue they got stuck with Biden because Cuomo had too many skeletons in his closet to be the replacement for Biden at the convention. The same thing with Murphy, with the nursing home deaths and the Cuomo nursing home deaths, and for whatever reason, Newsom might have had to have the same sort of skeletons too. But it was either going to be Cuomo or Murphy, I would argue. But they got stuck with Biden, and Plan C was to show those. It was to stuff the boxes so blatantly that even when they lose, they're still going to stick it to Trump in the second term with these excess deaths.
Yeah, which are real. I mean,
right.
This is not athletes acting on television. These people, we do have these excess deaths, and it is it's going to keep on going, unfortunately. And that's where the table. We've actually turned the corner where lots and lots of doctors are coming out and questioning the whole thing now. And once you question it, you don't go back because.
No.
I mean, once you open the Pandora's box well, not the Pandora's box, but once you see the reality, and it's shocking. It's got to be shocking people. It's got to be shocking people that have been, vote blue for their whole lives, It's got to be very, very shocking to think that, our people, our government let this happen. But they did. But good God, I hope it's over.
There's so many in denial. I mean, it's incredible. I didn't know anybody who died of COVID. I didn't know anybody who was really sick of COVID. I knew one person who was in a hospital, but the amount of people that I keep hearing that are in my age group is just astronomical. I mean, I would say within the past 3 weeks, I've heard of 3 people who died suddenly.
Mm, that's awful.
I mean, they were not close to me, but they were,
Yeah.
in my broader circle of people I know. So,
Hmm. And you're not a, you're a very young middle-aged man,
yeah,
and
thank you.
yeah. Well, let's see what else other people have on. Robert Kovac says Snohomish guy stayed in 911. I guess that means room number 911 at the when he flew into
Oh,
where is it? Was it SeaTac? I think where he flew in. Um,
was that last year?
no, in 2019, in 2020, the first guy in the first case of COVID.
Oh, okay.
The guy we call Snohomish County man, who was the Chinese ophthalmologist, I believe, that came, got
Okay,
sick,
right. I
infected his wife, went home, and disappeared. And so from there, we have generated the synthetic, computer generated model from which all diagnoses have been made ever since. Yep. It's okay. I'm going to lose my channel again, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think even YouTube is starting to realize that this thing is going a different direction. And what about Italy? I don't know. I know you and I have talked about Italy from time to time, and it's pretty exciting to see this woman, Giorgia Meloni, elected the first female prime minister of Italy, and on a ticket which sounds like, maybe some early fascist type of association. But to me, what she's talking about is the things that are important to me. She talks about family. She talks about religion. She talks about teaching children, having good education, have supporting mothers, um, uh, the kind of things that we thought we could take for granted. And one of the points that she made was that she wants, people are now, instead of being a grandmother or aunt or this, they're Generation X, Generation this, Generation that,
hmm,
and everybody is talked about as a part of a numerical cohort,
right.
as opposed to a part of a family. And there, the reason, what she said was, the reason that they oppose these things is because it is the family that is their enemy. That as long
Hmm.
as we can keep having strong family relationships, that we are immune to their program. And I think that's probably where I feel too. I feel like when I was in Ireland, to make this short, in August for my book launch, and to meet with all the O'Loughlin's from around the world in a little clan gathering. It was really fun. But oh gosh, what was I going to say? Um, oh, my brain just left on me. We're What was I just talking about?
Ireland,
Yeah, before Ireland though. I went to Ireland to
the,
make a point
the family in Ireland.
about the family in Ireland, and just I don't know. It's important. It's important to me. And oh, the word was deracinated.
Okay.
I didn't know that word, but one of our presenters was using the word deracinated, and it means that you've lost your roots.
Huh.
And that's why I went to Ireland, because I lost my roots. I want to find my roots. and it is the deracinated people that are attracted to things like Freemasonry or the priesthood or just in the army or anything that seems like a bunch of brothers or something that they can live as a part of a group, if not a family, at least something that replaces the family.
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
but they need to separate us from our families in order to make use of us as they want to turn us into the whatever they want, the mercenaries, the stormtroopers, the uh, or the psychologists and psychiatrists to flip other people. That the idea of separating us from the family is essential to their program of of imposing a totalitarian force upon all of us that would control us. And that's what she says. I don't know if you had a chance to hear her speak,
No,
but
yeah, and I was it was pretty, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, it would have been pretty standard campaign type uh, rhetoric. We've not been called right wing fascist. There's nothing right wing fascist about what she said at all. It was. I remember, Le Pen, not the daughter, but that was maybe pretty right wing. But this is, and then there's looking for controls on immigration in Italy because they're losing their culture. It has nothing to do with necessarily the immigrants. Nobody wants them, but they really, Italy has a culture that is worth preserving, and all the immigration and lack of assimilation, it goes away. So the media is going to call her right wing fascist because that's all they're left with. They have nothing else to.
yeah,
I said on Twitter today, I says, if you say don't fondle the children, then they're going to call you a right wing fascist, right? Even no matter how insane that sounds, um, because they can't go anywhere else. They're almost they've trapped themselves in their own rhetoric and stupidity that everything's a right wing fascist now. It's I hope she does well. I mean, it's the Italians. I'm surprised the Italians put up with this nonsense for so long because they smoke wherever they want, no matter how many no smoking signs there are. The IRS agents actually do carry guns because nobody pays their taxes, whether they have a gun or not. They're not one for succumbing to stupid leadership. They get rid of their government 300 times since World War II. They don't need these rascals.
yeah. I heard a huge crowd shouting, "Draghi, Draghi, vaffanculo." All right. Well, with that note, you can guess what that means. I hope
Yeah,
if you
that
didn't.
might get yes. You can say that, but that you can't say the other words on.
No, no. Well, oh, it's all in fun. YouTube censors, all in fun. All right, Bill, it's been a great hour for me.
Yeah,
Thanks
it
again
was
for
fun.
being with us and catching up. And I'm going to do some more digging into Mr. Angleton, Mr.
Yeah,
Trubetskoy,
right.
Golitsyn, and see what else we can find.
Yeah.
Everybody keep up watching Bill over at dstatenews.com and support him through his Patreon, which you can find right there.
Very good. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.